When I saw makeup that was listed as vegan, I thought it was just a random title that they would add to the product to hopefully sell more products. But I did not realize that there could be animal products in our makeup. A large percentage of cosmetic manufacturers actually use fish scales to provide that sheen and shimmer in their makeup. Sometimes they're even painted on fake pearls to give that iridescent pearl-like finish. But this is not like a new thing. This actually dates all the way back to ancient Egypt. Cleopatra was said to have incorporated fish scales into her cosmetics to achieve that shimmering glow. She would use a lipstick made out of beeswax, crushed ants, and carmine, which is that red or purplish red pigment that comes from crushing up a bug called cochineal. And then she would add a layer of fish scales for that frost-like effect. Historically, fish scales were used to make jewelry, arrowheads, medicine, and even leather, which makes sense because if you've ever, touched a fish skin, it is very strong. And to make lipsticks, they would use a mixture of red algae and fish scales. Fish scales can also be used to make glue, and it still is used to make glue nowadays. And this was actually really interesting to me, so I looked up how to turn fish scales into glue, but fish scales are actually made of calcium phosphate and protein or collagen. So heating the fish scales with some water releases the calcium from the collagen, resulting in a sticky glue. But back to fish scales in our makeup. If you want to know if an ingredient in your makeup was made from fish scales, you can look out for the ingredients guanine or CI75170. And in Europe, it has to be labeled as CI75170. Usually, these fish scales are sourced from herring or other small silvery fish, and it's used for shimmer in nail polish, lipsticks, mascara, and some skincare as well. It just gives that iridescent effect. And guanine is that crystalline material that is obtained from the fish scales, and we'll talk about how we get from fish scale to guanine in a little bit. So according to the FDA, it is safe to use as a coloring agent in all cosmetics and personal care products, including those products intended for the eye area, as long as it conforms to the FDA specifications. So how do we get from fish to lipstick? So the fish scales and the swim bladders, which is an organ that's usually filled with gas to help the fish control their buoyancy underwater, are heated up to 65 to 100 degrees Celsius, and then it's suspended in alcohol. The guanine crystals then settle to the bottom and are filtered out. And those crystals are the bright and silvery pearl essence that are then added into all sorts of products. So it does sound pretty wild to go and get fish scales from fish to put in our products, but actually using fish scales and swim bladders in our cosmetics means less of the fish is wasted, since people who eat fish typically don't eat the scales, whereas the swim bladders in certain cuisines it is considered a delicacy. But the tricky part is that it's hard to find out whether the guanine used in your product is actually sustainably sourced from responsible fisheries or if they're sourced from trawlers that destroy the marine ecosystem. By sourcing guanine from fish processing byproducts or using synthetic alternatives, aim to actually reduce the environmental impact of the cosmetics industry. This led me on to another train of thought of if fish feel pain, and there are quite a few articles out there, some citing the same experiment, which is the experiment that they put fish in these enriched tanks, and after injecting the fish with acid, they'd prefer to swim to this barren tank that has painkillers being pumped into the water. And in another study, fish acted normal after they were given morphine after their acid injection versus the fish that didn't get morphine. So it suggested that one group of fish was experiencing pain while the other group was not. But in this paper listed on the National Library of Medicine actually debunks this, saying that a study done in 2017, the fish were most likely using escape and avoidance maneuvers than actually feeling pain. And another point is that fish lack a cerebral cortex that reptiles and mammals have that is fundamental for the awareness of sensory stimuli, and I'll have all the sources listed down below if you want to look further into them. But nonetheless, some people may not agree with using animal products in their makeup or in general. So there are vegan alternatives. Some of the alternatives include mica or biodegradable glitter, and there's also another vegan alternative called bismuth oxychloride that a lot of brands are opting to use. And according to this article on Paula's Choice, bismuth oxychloride is a synthetic pearl, and it's actually the primary ingredient in most powders that are listed as mineral makeup. And although this ingredient does occur in nature, it does not occur in significant quantities to be commercially viable. But as I've been learning more about clean brands and clean products, not everything that comes from nature is good for you, essentially. So just be aware of companies using greenwashing or fear-mongering to try to get your money. So how do you feel about potentially having fish in your cosmetics? I personally don't mind. It's an ancient technique, and I do eat meat. I am not for animal testing, but I do hope that these companies that are using guanine are sourcing the fish scales sustainably. I also don't mind the fact that a lot of companies are moving towards vegan alternatives, especially if they can achieve the same results with less of an environmental impact. Well, anyway, that was all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time. Bye!